What happens when the quietest state in America becomes the testing ground for a military-style operation that's about to change your life, no matter where you live? Freezing, smelling of salt and pine. It's the kind of place where people don't even lock their front doors. But tonight, the silence is broken by the low hum of unmarked SUVs idling at the end of a gravel driveway. There are no sirens. There are no flashing lights. There's just the sound of heavy boots hitting the pavement and the metallic clink of tactical gear. This is Operation Catch of the Day. Most Americans think the border crisis is something that stays in Texas or Arizona. They think it's 1,000 miles away. But while you were sleeping, Deputy Assistant Director Patricia Hyde confirmed something that should send a shiver down your spine. ICE didn't go to a big city. They went to the northernmost tip of the country. They targeted 1,400 people in a single push. But here's the part they aren't telling you on the evening news. This wasn't just a random enforcement surge. It was a proof of concept. If you think this is just about immigration, you're missing the bigger picture. This is about the total disappearance of under the radar. It's about a new type of domestic infrastructure that has just been activated. And the reason Maine was chosen? It's because if they can do it there, in the most remote corners of the Northeast, they can do it anywhere. By the end of this video, you're going to understand why Maine was the worst nightmare scenario for civil liberties, and why the next 48 hours in this country will look nothing like the last 40 years. But before we start, subscribe and hype this video. Leave your like and comment where you're watching from, and your thoughts on it. It's free for you, but it keeps us motivated to post more such content. Now let's go back to For decades, Maine has been a sanctuary of a different kind. Not because of laws, but because of geography. It's vast. It's rugged. It's easy to get lost in the woods or disappear into the maritime industry. If you wanted to stay off the grid, you went to Maine. But Operation Catch of the Day changed the rules of the game. When Patricia Hyde spoke to Fox News, she used a specific phrase. She said these 1,400 individuals were under the radar. Think about that. To be under the radar means you aren't in the system. You aren't checking in. You don't have a digital footprint that screams, "Look at me!" So how did they find them? This is where the story gets dark. To catch 1,400 people in a state as spread out as Maine, you can't just knock on doors. You need a level of surveillance that most Americans believe is illegal. We're talking about the integration of local DMV records, utility bills, and even private fishing licenses being fed into a central AI database. The struggle wasn't the arrests. The struggle was the invisibility gap. For years, federal agencies complained they couldn't see into the rural heartland. They called it a blind spot. They just cured that blindness. When the first door was kicked in during this operation, it wasn't just a win for ICE. It was the death of the American blind spot. We've entered an era where off the grid no longer exists. But the real reason they started in Maine involves a secret about the American economy that no one wants to admit. Here is the delayed payout that the politicians won't talk about. Maine's economy is built on two things: the ocean and the earth. Lobster, timber, and agriculture. These are industries that require back-breaking labor in brutal conditions. For years, there has been a silent agreement in these industries. Don't ask, don't tell. Just get the work done. But Operation Catch of the Day just ripped that agreement to shreds. When ICE moved in, they didn't just take people. They froze an entire supply chain. Small business owners in Maine are now waking up to find their entire crews gone. Boats are staying docked. Crops are sitting in the dirt. But here is the twist. This wasn't an accident. The worst nightmare isn't just the enforcement, it's the planned vacuum. By removing 1,400 essential workers in a high-intensity push, the government is testing how much pressure the local economy can take before it breaks. Why would they want to break it? Because a broken economy requires a solution. And the solution being whispered about in Washington involves a new type of digital labor ID, one that tracks every hour you work, every dollar you spend, and every move you make. They used Maine as a pressure cooker. They wanted to see if the community would revolt or if they would beg for a system, any system, to bring the labor back. The answer they got will determine what happens to your job in the next 6 months. But there's something even more terrifying than the economy. It's what happened to the 1,400 people after they were picked up. This is where the mystery turns into a high-stakes documentary. In a normal law enforcement action, you have a paper trail. You have a booking photo. You have a court date. But Operation Catch of the Day used what insiders are calling the Ghost Protocol. Eyewitnesses in Portland and Bangor reported seeing buses with blacked-out windows heading toward regional airports in the middle of the night. No names were released. No processing centers were open to the public. The deputy assistant director said they were enforcing the law. But the way they are doing it looks more like a military extraction than a standard deportation. This is the worst nightmare for the American legal system. We are seeing the birth of a shadow justice branch. If 1,400 immigrants they tracked everyone they talked to, everyone they worked for, and everyone who lived next door. During her statement, Hyde didn't say the operation was over. She said, "This is the first phase of a national rollout." Most people missed that. They were too busy arguing about the politics of the border. But the national rollout means the tech, the secrecy, and the Ghost Protocol are being packed into crates and shipped to the next state right now. Think about your town. Think about the people who work at the local grocery store, the construction site down the road, or the farm on the edge of town. Now, imagine them vanishing between the hours of 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. The worst nightmare isn't the raid itself. It's the aftermath of absence. When you wake up and the person who has been your neighbor for 10 years is just gone. No goodbye. No explanation. Just a lingering sense that the radar is finally everywhere. The government is betting that you will be too distracted by the headlines to notice the framework being built around you. They are betting that as long as it's happening in remote Maine, you won't care. But Maine was the finish line of the old America. It's now the starting line of the new one. The strategy is clear: total visibility. Zero friction. No exceptions. The 1,400 people in Maine were just the catch of the day. The net is currently being cast much, much wider. And the most dangerous thing you can do right now is believe that this ends at the Maine border. Because the infrastructure used in this raid is already being plugged into the grid in Ohio, Florida, and California. The nightmare didn't just come true. It just went viral. If you want to understand how this ties into the massive, secret construction of digital processing hubs popping up in the Midwest, you need to see what we uncovered in our investigation into the new federal land acquisitions. If these 1,400 people weren't taken to local jails, and they weren't immediately deported, where are the blacked-out buses actually going? To find the answer, we have to look away from the rocky coast of Maine and turn our eyes toward the flat, desolate plains of the American Midwest. While the media was focused on the drama of the raids, a series of massive land acquisitions was happening in states like Nebraska, Iowa, and Kansas. Large swaths of land, thousands of acres, were purchased under shell companies with names like Terraform Logistics and Rural Infrastructure Holdings. But when investigative journalists looked closer, the funding for these purchases didn't come from private equity. It came from federal grants designated for emergency preparedness. This is the Continental Pipeline. When those buses left Maine, they weren't just driving to the nearest airport. They were heading to what are now being called processing hubs. These aren't the chain-link fence holding centers you've seen on the news. These are permanent, high-tech facilities built with the speed of a military base in a war zone. The struggle for the average American is understanding the scale. We're used to seeing camps. What we're seeing now are industrial transition zones. Inside these Midwest hubs, the 1,400 from Maine are being subjected to something called data deep diving. It's not just about their fingerprints. It's about mapping their entire social network. Who did they call? Who did they Venmo? Where did they buy their coffee? The government isn't just removing people. They are harvesting the data of their lives to create a map of the invisible economy. Every person taken from Maine is a thread. By pulling the thread, the government is finding thousands of more people to target in the next phase. The nightmare isn't just the arrest. It's the fact that once you enter the Continental Pipeline, you become a data point used to hunt your friends, your family, and your coworkers. And the technology making this possible is already inside your pocket. The answer lies in something called geofencing 2.0. In the past, the government needed a warrant to track your phone. But Operation Catch of the Day utilized a loophole that should terrify every single American, regardless of their legal status. They didn't track the people. They tracked the digital exhaust. Every time you use a free app, every time you connect to public Wi-Fi, every time you use a loyalty card at a grocery store, you leave a trail. In Maine, the enforcement agencies didn't go to the courts first. They went to the data brokers. They bought the location data of every person who had been in the vicinity of high-interest job sites, the docks, the farms, the processing plants. Then, they used AI to filter out anyone who didn't have a social security number tied to their advertising ID. Within seconds, the AI produced a map. 1,400 glowing red dots across the state of Maine. This is the Silicon Net. It's a dragnet that catches everyone. If you were a legal citizen standing next to one of those 1,400 people, your data was swept up too. Your movements, your habits, and your associations are now part of a federal file. The struggle here is that you can't opt out. You can't hide from a system that buys its information from the private market. But here's the real kicker. The Silicon Net is being integrated into the smart city infrastructure. Those 15-minute cities they keep talking about? The ones where everything you need is within a short walk? They are being designed with this exact tracking technology at the core. They aren't building a convenient neighborhood. They are building a digital corral. Maine was just the first time they used the gate. If you look at the maps of the Catch of the Day operation, you notice a pattern. The raids didn't happen in the cities. They happened in the gray zones.